It's Spoilerin time, folks. This is the show that takes all the hard work we do at Cordkillers, where we figure out where are these shows, how do we watch them, then we watch them and talk about them here. This week we'll be talking about Picard, Season 3, Episode 2, the finale of 2521, Episode 16, and Episode 7 of The Last of Us. I'm Tom Merritt. He's Brian Brushwood.
Heck yeah, dude. Where do you want to start?
Let's start with The Last of Us, Season 1, Episode 7, where we get the Ellie backstory. We're always going to talk a little bit about how this compares to the game and everything, but my perspective is coming from never having played the game, and I was concerned that I might get bored by this episode Left Behind, and then we showed up in a mall, a post-apocalyptic mall with the power on, and some of the stores were empty. And I was delighted as they went on a date at the mall and played video games in the post-apocalypse. And that was enough to keep me interested until we got to the actual danger, which you pretty much saw coming, and lets us see how Ellie got bit. But I was a little surprised, did not show us how she ended up with the Fireflies after that, even though her friend is part of the Fireflies. And of course, this flashback, like previous flashbacks, bookended by, us seeing that she's taking care of Joel, and then he tells her to go away. The flashback is kind of a long metaphor for being abandoned and why she doesn't want to abandon friends. And then we see her at the end coming back to Joel. So Brian, to you, for the I've played the game perspective, what did you think?
Well, this is in a unique category because when I remember my playing of the game, I remember the canonical original game experience. I believe this was, Bryce, correct me if I'm wrong, this was DLC, right?
Yeah, it was actually called Left Behind, which was the name of this episode.
Yeah, which for all I know, I probably did play. I believe my daughter said I did, but it didn't stick with me. Canonically, what I remember is Joel getting impaled and then, playing the game as Ellie afterward, which was dramatic. So as a result, all of this felt like a little bit of
like
kind
downloadable content.
Yeah, exactly. It felt like DLC, yeah. and as a result, I found myself. And don't get me wrong, it's a sweet story and it's good and it's well executed. I couldn't stop my producer brain from thinking which were licensed properties and how that stuff worked and all that. But that's just my lens that I view this through. So ultimately, all of this felt like a little bit of running in place to me. But it's great, and to be honest, Tom, I'm really, really glad that you loved this for what it was. I'm glad that it gave you a surprise respite, that it felt like a standalone story the way Episode 3 did.
And it's funny how those things, because I did exactly the same thing. I was like, oh, I wonder if they licensed that. Well, they obviously didn't license American Girls because we don't see them saying American Girl. But
and like some of them, like they have just the right number of blacked out letters that it makes me wonder if they're trying to get away with something. When
you're enjoying it, that just seems like a fun little side quest, versus when you're not enjoying it as much, it becomes a distraction. I totally know that happens. And to me, this was it was the thing that made me like it. I was actually prepared not to like it. I was prepared to be a little bored based on what I had seen from the previews going in, and I wasn't. So it's a lot of it's always about setting your expectations, right?
Yeah. What about you, Bryce?
I thought it was cute, but I did also feel like it was missing something. I guess it's tough because I think the thing I'm missing out of this is more of a well-roundedness to the start and the end of this story. Mm-hmm. We kind of chop in to.
We get thrown in the middle and we don't see the end. Yeah.
Yeah. And now, granted, there are more episodes left to come, but it feels like if this was another show, if this was not The Last of Us, you would have taken this episode and had more action, had more suspense. The last bit would have been longer. But I thought this was fine. I guess a respite is a good way to describe it. Like we're out of this. We're we're taking a break from Joel, and you're right, Brian. Like in the game, there's such a huge jump there that you kind of lose some of that effectiveness by going into this.
Yeah, but then again, Joel's injury in the TV show is not as grievous as it is grievous in the
General
video game.
Grievous.
It's like it's so awful in the game that the moment you take over as Ellie, you just assume, whoa, Joel's dead.
Sure. But also the game never goes back to that. I don't know if the second part they do, but the game skips over all of this.
Correct.
There's not even so I don't know. It's a little awkward putting these two story beats here, I guess.
But and I acknowledge that the TV show is going to be different from the game, and there are different rules to television, and you don't have enough time to, yeah.
Does it feel like this show feels like an anthology to me?
Yeah.
I don't love that. I don't like that. I feel like this should be the Joel and Ellie show, and it's great that we're seeing extended bits. We're seeing this DLC. We saw the Bill episode, but I do feel a little bit like we're seeing the world of The Last of Us featuring our friends Joel and Ellie, but not the Joel and Ellie story about the big drama going on just with them.
I understand what you're saying, but this episode is the Ellie backstory, which in a Joel and Ellie story has a place. To tell you, because the reason I say that is one of the things I took from this that I enjoyed was seeing which parts of Ellie that you see her with Joel came out when she was in this episode. Which parts of her are consistent and which parts were different, and it kind of is a sort of wonderful understated yes, when you love someone and you're Ellie, you do these things. Also, she does some of those things with Joel. Isn't that interesting? Right. But, there's obviously a line where you're like, but Joel isn't that kind of relationship with her. And I thought that was telling of like, oh, these are parts of Ellie that were there before the trauma, before she got bit, and the way she behaves around someone that she loves and respects.
Also, nothing exists in a vacuum. And when the game came out, The Walking Dead had yet to become the phenomenon that it became. So as a result, the linear narrative that you're craving, Bryce, has already been explored. Whether or not it's a similar story or not is up for debate, but definitely a post-apocalyptic linear narrative had been very exhaustively explored. So that's part of why I don't mind. I think you're 100% right, Bryce, that it is an anthology, but I think that's the right move for this story so that you avoid more comparisons to The Walking Dead.
Yeah. And
that doesn't mean that it makes it better.
World, this episode is not the most disconnected anthology episode either.
Right.
Yeah,
at least it has one of our main characters in it.
Yeah, if this is the Joel and Ellie story, here's Ellie's story. Yeah.
I guess that is a good point, because I mean this is directly about her,
right?
But I guess I get it, and is it a good time for us to see this? I guess it is basically.
That was a question I had too. Was like, I love this story. I'm enjoying it more than I expected. I really am more concerned with Joel though. Like we didn't. I really, and maybe this is what you're feeling when you say like, I want it to be the Joel and Ellie story, is like, I want it to be the Joel and Ellie story, not just tell me about Ellie. Like you put up huge stakes. Is Joel going to survive? And then you made me wait an episode to find out, is Joel still going to survive?
I actively felt a wave of, dang it, the moment I figured out that we're not going to get past Joel being injured. And I think that tells
you mentioned that last week, and I could tell that you didn't watch the next week on because they.
Yeah.
Because they spelled out.
It's very clear they were going to do this instead. Yeah. I wonder if he'll live.
I mean, that's just it. There's no. We're not.
I do wish we had more infected in the show. I do wish there was a little bit more action. They're using it very plot point centrically. They're kind of not splashing infected on our faces, to use so many words.
Yeah.
I don't mind that because it can be overused and it kind of lures you into a false sense of security, which is a great dynamic for a lot of these scenarios. But I am surprised that they're not using it more. It is kind of the point of the story. So, yeah. It looks like we're gonna get back to the present though next week.
How many more episodes do we have?
Oh, that's
two.
I believe it's 10 episodes in the season.
Okay, all right.
I'll double check that to be sure, but I believe that is correct.
2 left. Open Bayou saying.
Yeah.
Normally
when
9
we are
episodes.
in need and look for the light. 2 left.
Wow.
So just 9 episodes this season.
I'll be shutting my mouth.
And that will be the last you hear about The Last of Us for this episode. That is The Last of Us Season 1, Episode 7. All right. We somehow made it to 2521, Season 1, Episode 16, the finale. I would like to reassert that I said early on, at any point you could tap out. I am surprised that you never tapped out. Brian, now that you have seen the entire run, thoughts, questions, opinions about 2521?
So, reminder that the reason I wanted to keep going is because I wanted to contemplate what it is you love about this series so much. And if I were to guess, Tom, I think what you love about it is just how big the journey feels by the end. It spans, what, 15 years or so? Well, I guess all the way to the present, so 25 years or whatever. And it is authentic and real in that relationships almost happen, but then sometimes don't. And it's nobody's fault, and that different paths are taken. I did very much, starting at the end, I rather liked the kind of virtual back and forth conversation that was not spoken in the present tense, but was discovered in the present moment. I thought there were some sweet landings for everyone. It made me wonder if I did myself a disservice by watching it at 1.5 speed, but I don't know what else I would have done. Otherwise, I wouldn't have ever finished it at all. So I'm more thankful that I finished the whole story at 1.5 speed, but I definitely reduced my fidelity of the experience by doing so.
Yeah, let's just skip it. I was skipping ahead a little bit. Not much, but just, hey, there's, you know what, I got it. Okay, okay, I got it. But not as much, certainly not as much as like these past 2 episodes have really been the meat and potatoes, Tom.
And I did not give Skip instructions for 15 because I didn't think there were any places to skip, and for 16 because it was the finale and I didn't want to dictate the experience. Although I do think there are places like you've discovered where you can be like, okay, yeah, I could probably skip it.
Yeah, no, I watched the whole thing, and a lot of complicated endings, and I always respect that in a story.
Do we think she intentionally left the diary? Because I read on the bus, because I read her coming back and talking to the bus driver as, because then she had it sent directly to Ijin, right? I mean, it didn't go to her house; it ended up at his. They sent it to him.
Well,
got it in the mail
because his registration card was in the diary. So the person who found it.
It was the only ID that they had.
Looked through and for an address, and the only address was on Yujin's registration card.
So
she's
found
like,
it and
well,
dropped it off.
if they've got his registration card, I guess they're close. I'll send it to him.
And also, when
that's more
she's an
coincidental
adult,
than I like.
Nahito very clearly is very amazed as an adult to find this artifact of the past.
Discover.
So that tells me that it probably wasn't on purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. It's a lot like life. This show about life.
There you go. That's why I like it. This show continually surprised me, and I was pleased every time you said that, Brian. We're like, I thought they were going to do this, and then they did this, and I like that better. And I think that's why I thought of you when I was thinking of Korean shows, is because you really like that in a show.
Yeah.
It's not the only thing you like, and I think this is lacking other things that you like. But I was like, man, he's really going to like that aspect of this, where it's just going to continually surprise you as to, where it's going, and you think it's going to do this one thing and it doesn't, and it does it in a very practical and realistic way, to where it tells you a realistic story. And I think that's why I like this so much, is it says love stories are not, Cinderella, they lived happily ever after, but they don't have to be awful either. They can just be part of history, part of your own personal history, and be good, even though they're not still true. The line where she says, neither of us is at fault. But when they like, your support became burdensome. We're lovers only in the good times. I feel like this story, front to back, is about how real love is sometimes, and real love can be real and true and happy and wonderful, and not last. Every day was a practice, is what adult Hito says at one point toward the end, pointing out that she happily married, had a daughter, but it wasn't with this great love story. Yet that doesn't make her love story with Becky Jin any less because of that. And that's a message I don't ever see in these kinds of stories.
Did they ever during this series show us Hito's husband?
Not once.
Because
and it's not a like, oh, he's not around anymore. They just
it's not an issue.
Congratulations on your marriage. There's a father somewhere. That's unimportant to the story. And I actually love that they did that. They're like, we're just going to keep that out of it.
I'll admit that at some point during this finale, I thought, oh, wait, we've never seen the husband. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a casual mention of like, well, your husband died and maybe a rekindling, but they don't even give us like that. And they give us the complicated real life situation. I'll admit, Tom, despite all of the frustrations I had with the pacing and this story will probably have an outsized spot of real estate in my mind, partly because it's very long. This was a very long show, and they were not shy about re-showing us stuff we'd already seen before.
The clip show. Oh my God, the clips. That was a skipper.
Like, we get it. All the stuff we've just watched. I got it.
Yeah, and some of that is an artifact of this. This show is still designed to be aired on television live and watched live, right? And so they're doing that for the people
to get up and go pee
and grab a drink, or missed that episode when it aired and don't know how to use online to watch on demand and stuff like that. So yeah, there are parts of that where like, oh yeah, eminently skip if you're watching this in order.
Yeah. I'm thankful for the journey though. The real friends was the Korean dramas we watched along the way.
That's the one.
Well, and the strength of this is story. That's the one thing I realized as I was watching it is, like, okay, there are these flaws that you both have pointed out, and I readily admit them, but I didn't mind them because I love the story so much. And I think this story is going to stick with both of you, and I think that's good. It's very nostalgic in a way too, not just because it's set in the 90s, but it's about growing up. So there are certainly parts where I'm like, oh man, I remember being that age and having that feeling. I think they do that really well. But the other thing I learned is like, if I ever have the temerity to recommend another Korean drama for us to watch on Spoilerin time, I have a much better idea of where I will go and what I will recommend. I don't know if you'll ever want to do that again, but I think I would do a better job of picking a show that you wouldn't have to accommodate the way we've had to with this one.
Yeah, well, I feel like I've earned a lot of credits, and I get to make you sit through a lot of things that Brian likes.
Yes, you got 16 credits. So now we get to the real reason Brian kept watching to the end.
Well, no, but then I'll have to give skip guides or whatever. I may consolidate it to just 2 movies.
So trade your gift card of 16 down to 8 with no notes.
Yep.
Any other thoughts on 2521?
No, I'm really thankful we took the chance.
Oh, thanks, man. I'm glad to hear that. Anybody who watched this along with us, I'd be interested now that we're done, particularly to hear your thoughts, how you experienced it. I know a couple of you knew the show already, and some of you may have gone along with us a second time through, like I did. Any thoughts at all? Let us know. Cordkillers@gmail.com. That is 2521, season 1, episode 16. Let's talk Picard, season 3, episode 2. Oh, it was his son.
Yeah. I'm not going to lie. I got angry in the first 20 minutes of this episode.
Really?
Well, because everything was so transparent and everything just felt clumsy, and I was like, at least Riker's showing up. Like, he delivered an excellent performance. I didn't care for literally anyone else in the show. And then I don't know, around the 30-minute mark, I started to get lost in the hypnosis of it, and it started to feel a little bit over the top, and not as good as Lower Decks. But then by around the 40 minutes mark, I was like, all right, I'm kind of into this. This is pretty. That's
Really?
kind of
Oh, okay.
clever.
It
That's
turns you
kind of
around. That's
good. Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
There's some good beats in there. Like Picard wandering around setting stuff up. Like, why are you doing all that? And then all of a sudden, it's exactly at the right moment where they're trying to transport him out. And yes, of course. I mean, you would think they would have a genetic scanner just on every corner of a starship. Just stick your thumb in there. Of course, that's your son or whatever. But
Yeah.
I don't know. And yes, cheesiest thing in the world for Worf to come in at the end, but he did look like a badass, and I did like that they bothered to tie it into him spelling out that he was the person handling what's her name and the do not engage stuff. It was all right. It was all right. I'm still here for it.
I'll be honest. Rafi's parts were my favorite parts of this episode because I sort of liked the Tatooine cantina aspect of the world she's in, and I really loved that the non-feeling emotionless responses suddenly felt just like not filtered but accurate things that Worf would say. As soon as it would turn out it was Worf, I was like,
Of
oh,
course.
yeah, that's
That's
how he
exactly
talks.
Yeah. He would talk like a soulless computer AI telling a human what to do.
Except he would have a lower tone. That's the only difference.
Also-
so yeah, I kind of loved that was Worf. I didn't love almost anything that happened on the Titan.
There was some silly dialogue where it's like, what happened? They threw a ship at us. It's like, yes, we just watched that. You don't need to, it's like, you don't need to act confused about how ships work when you're presumably spent years to become the ensign that you are.
And I agree that Riker showed up and wasn't bad, but I'm still frustrated with Picard not acting like Picard, and I try to remind myself like he's a much older Picard. He's not in his own body. There's a lot going on, but I want to see the echo of the confident Picard who is risen to admiral status, not the Picard who's like doubting himself constantly around this snot-nosed captain. Like the Picard that you love from Next Generation would figure out an elegant way to verbally battle Shaw. And it might not work, which would be great, but he wouldn't just be like, oh, I don't know what to do. And I feel like it's out of character for him, and it just bugs me.
Maybe it's because when I watched Logan recently, and he plays Professor X. He's intentionally playing somebody, a doddering old Professor X who's, in his 90s and losing it. I feel like he's just still playing that character, but in the wrong show. And I agree.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bummer.
And what I liked last episode is that it was all nostalgia. It was all like, hey, doesn't this feel like a Star Trek Next Generation movie? And this didn't. This went back to being an episode of Picard, at least on the Titan.
Felt like a video game cutscene.
And maybe that's what's bugging me.
Not for nothing, though, I did feel like there was some real meat to Rafi's commitment to break her sobriety for the sake of staying undercover. She seems to have paid lip service to being on the straight and narrow.
Yep.
But also it's foreshadowed in the fact that she doesn't choose her son over the mission. And then, that seems like being close to an addict, you kind of recognize like, yeah, that's what you do is you justify the half step closer to your addiction.
You find reasons to be really near so that it's not your fault.
Correct. Yeah. But unfortunately, I don't expect them to really unpack any of that to my satisfaction. So as a result, it felt a little bit shallow to me, but
yeah, we'll see. I didn't hate the episode. Certainly my least favorite this season.
Hey, Bryce, how much do you love Picard?
Oh, I didn't watch this one.
Okay, good.
I didn't. No.
Are you gonna?
Oh, nah. Nah, maybe we'll try the Mandalorian.
what?
Well, you know what? Nah, I think
Is your
I'm out.
answer? Is your answer? I just did.
I think we got other stuff to watch at the moment.
All right. Any other thoughts on Picard 302? I didn't get anything that made me want to give up on the season in this, but I'm
I'll
hoping we
I'll
get back
see
to
it
that
through,
season.
but
Yeah.
increasingly I may play a little bit of Marvel Snap while I'm watching.
We're getting to a point
You
where
gotta
we'll have
work
4
hard, you gotta get
shows.
the- Yeah.
Well, at a point,
Oh,
you
I'd
could.
hate to drop it, but yeah.
I mean, it doesn't
You
sound
may
like
have
you'd
to
have to
make a
draw
call.
it.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what? They continue to do all this remix stuff, which I'm into up to a point, but it's like at some point a remix is just a bunch of old crap I heard before. And that's coming from the guy who loves covers and remixes.
It sounds like it.
A good remix takes Fleetwood Mac and Beyonce and puts it together and makes a song that sounds new and different.
Yep.
A bad remix is just 2 songs smushed together, and you're like, yeah, they sound like both those songs, just at different times.
Yeah. I think you're talking me out of the show, Tom.
I know. Well, folks, you want to talk us back into it, cordkillers@gmail.com. That is Picard Season 3, Episode 2. And that is it for this episode of Spoilerin Time. Next week, The Last of Us, Episode 8, Picard, Episode 3, and The Mandalorian comes back, Season 3, Episode 1. We'll spoil you then. Patreon.com/Cordkillers for these shows early, special after talk, all the perks. You're outside the club unless you're inside. Patreon.com/Cordkillers. We'll spoil you next time.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.